to my own surprise, because it was my first time with Zabbix. It only took 3 days. And it was improved compared to old monitoring, because the templates. But I like writing. Well, I'm doing my blog, so of course I like writing. But yeah.
Today we have a very interesting guest, Janne Pikkarainen, the IT professional, DevOps, tech journalist, and the author behind the What's Up Home blog about monitoring his own home. Hi Janne, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you discovered technology, um, why you decided to actually tie your life.
It's a combination. I'm an old guy, so around 1986, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, one of my friends, he got Commodore 64, and of course that got my attention. Then sooner rather than later, my primary school, they got computers there. So the school principal, he was thinking ahead of time, so he thought that computers will be the future. So we had actually very um, technologically advanced school for the time. So I kind of grew up with the computers. Then I got my own Commodore 64 in 1986, and then later Amiga and PC, and then got to work to Microbitti magazine in 1999. From there, I spending my whole career in IT. So yeah, I got here thanks to my old school and my friends. And well, that I have never regretted it, because I really like technology and computers, as you can probably guess, because I'm doing this also on my free during my free time. So yeah, that's how I started. And since luckily the Microbitti magazine, it was part of big media company. So then later on we got migrated to this IT team that took care of everything on that media company Sanoma. So then I did learn how to really admin big and really important services, like your daily newspapers or internet radio stations or whatever you have. Uh, yeah, and then I got the first point in 2014, and I have been there ever since. So that's my life.
So you kind of quite along with the company, right?
Yeah, I seem to be sticking with companies for a long time. First at Sanoma, 15 years. Now in February, I have been at Forcepoint 11 years already. So, yep.
Yeah. Well, it's always a clash between two types of personality. One type of personality sticks for a company for a long period, while the second type of personality kind of gets pretty much quickly bored, and they're starting to looking for a new gig somewhere outside, maybe move on to the newer company. I mean, sometimes obviously it's driven by the monetary thing, how you keep yourself entertained within the company.
Well, even though I have been with the same company for a long time, my role has changed multiple times. So that's almost like entering a new company every time. Like, for example, in August 2022, we got this site reliability engineering team formed within Forcepoint, and then my role completely changed from my previous role, which was inside corporate IT, so part of the Forcepoint. And I get to do new things. I'm whenever I have some not so busy time, I'm then doing something completely else, like learning generative AI, or trying to do some automation or whatever. Even doing my blog. So I always trying to learn uh, something new, or alternatively, I'm looking for better ways to do what I'm already doing.
That's quite interesting. But you also you were doing the technical journalism, right?
Well, you have to keep in mind that my first job was Microbitti magazine, which is I think the biggest computer magazine in Scandinavia. So at least in Finland. So if you start your job or your career inside computer magazine, well, that's how you learn that. Uh, to be honest, my journalism is my blog, and then maybe 5 or 6 times a year, I now write a column to that Microbit magazine still. So uh, those columns are not super technical. I'm mostly more like philosophical about AI or new technologies or cybersecurity or whatever I write there. But I like writing. Well, I'm doing my blog, so of course I like writing. But yeah.
So you haven't broke your ties with that microbit.
No, 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 no. I'm still in contact with them, or they are in contact with me. So yeah, well, I grew up with them, really. So
It's good to keep that conversation going and to actually keep a warm relationships whenever you go, because well, you never know when your paths are going to cross once again. So you started with Amiga. Um, have you played games or you tried to write the games?
yeah, with Commodore 64, we almost had to write our own games, or write more like manual copy paste from that Microbit magazine. They had those simple Commodore 64 basic listings, and then we have to type. When I moved on to Amiga, then it was completely different. I did everything. I have this synthesizer, so I had MIDI interface connected to Amiga, so I tried to making music with it. I had Real 3D, so the ray tracing software. I tried to do primitive 3D with my Amiga. Uh, I had some Deluxe Paint like drawing slash animation software. Some Vista, which get generated your landscapes for you. Oh, everything you can imagine of. I was very creative with the Amiga. Of course, I did some programming with it using RX. With that, you can command some other program within some other program. For example, I had my own BBS running, so using RX, it took daily backups of my BBS, and then even during the backup, it did launch Scala multimedia program to show some PowerPoint style slideshow that backup is in progress. It was funny. It was funny. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, during my Amiga years, I was mostly creative. But then when I got my first PC and Linux on it, actually in my Amiga 1200, I did install Debian M60K, 68K port as well. But I really moved on to Linux around 1998, 1999 with yeah with my first PC.
I stumbled on this channel very accidentally. What's interesting, if you uh, if you are going to listen to multiple of the same age as the root, they all started with something like Amiga, and they started to actually write some songs. But yeah, it was interesting that all started with these computers back in the days, and you could either write games or a lot of DJs were actually trying to make music with this computer. Quite a multi tool, right?
Yeah, that was, and even though we didn't have internet back then, I claim that it was easier to learn things like making music or 3D programs because of the reason that if we take a look at real 3D or Pro Tracker from that time, there's not so many buttons and menus. Now, if you today start learning 3D, open Blender, and you are in deep trouble.
And now things become more and more and more complex, and it becomes harder and harder to learn because again, it becomes more complicated technology wise, but it also, I think, becomes complicated feature wise, right? the more features we're starting to have, the more complicated it is to start learning anything. What would be your take on that? The progression of technology.
Yeah, that's the thing I both love and hate. Uh, Love part is that it's now, thanks to open source, for example, it's possible to do things that were impossible or at least very expensive. So, mm, well, Blender as an example, it's very, very complex 3D software, but on the other hand, it's fully professional. You can do pretty much anything with it. Like, take a look what Ian Hubert is doing with his uh, um, in his YouTube channel, and I don't even remember the series name he's doing with it. But anyway, you can do so much with today's software, but the learning curve, and then also the number of options you have. If you want to learn how to be a system administrator, it was so simple when I started. But now you have on-premise stuff, you have your traditional Apache Nginx, but then you have this cloud mess around you with AWS and Azure and whatever, and their enormously complex stack what they offer. So
I feel that it just exponentially grows and grows and grows, and every time we're introducing a new tool to solve an issue, and this tool solves one issue, but then introduces to 5 other issues.
uh, I would love if we would go back to simpler times for many cases. I can see some very simple web pages that could be really much static HTML. They are run through some complex pipeline, like you just described, using containers and Kubernetes and whatever, with no need for that. Uh, so over engineering is maybe the word I'm looking after. So whenever today's people start a new project, they should think that do they really need to do it in such complex way instead of going for some simple and more reliable and more understandable and easier to debug. I can understand the use cases for these complex container orchestrator or whatever things. If you have a huge website which load comes and goes, and you have to make sure it scales and then scales down again, and you don't have the money to buy servers in multiple data centers, at least for start. So yeah.
Yeah, over engineering. That's the right word for that.
Yeah, maybe this is like you said earlier, that some people they stay within one company for a short period then move on. Maybe these kind of guys also then hunt for those buzzwords, and then they try to ride the wave, uh, whether that makes sense or not. So, well, AI, for example, yeah, it's an interesting thing, but also it's kind of this bubble which is about to burst, because there are so many different AI companies that all of them just cannot survive, and it's being used for the most stupid purposes. There's of course good things out there, but sometimes I feel that products they just get some AI extension so they can ask for some more cash from you.
An API request to a chat GPT in the backend.
Exactly.
One of my favorite car journalists, automotive journalist, is Matt Watson from CarWow, and he had a very frustrating talk about modern cars. It sounds kind of grandpa-ish, but his take was that back, like 10, maybe 10, 15 years ago, he said, I can, and I'm paraphrasing it right now, so it's not like one to one. I can sit in any car. You can give me keys from any car, almost any car. I will step into that, and I will be able to adjust the climate control and the temperature in a second. Now, if you give me a key from a car, I'm sitting down in the new inside the new car, and now I need a bloody manual to actually figure out how to enable heated seat, how to disable the automatic temperature adjustment, and all that kind of thing. Because, and my take here is that because we moved from this thing being, a simple switch, pretty much standardized, to a tech. And when it comes to tech, each company thinks that they know the best way how to do the technology.
Yes, we have Toyota RAV4. Luckily, it has for the heating and climate control, all that. It's through physical buttons, so with many other things. But then the touch screen, well, I don't know how Toyota, with their size, they can do such unintuitive user interfaces. I mean, uh, there's for the navigation, for example, it's not so easy to try to figure out how it would show you the route it's going through, all the turns and different roads. Or so some simple stuff can be very hard to actually access through that. So luckily, in our car, it's limited to navigation and some audio things. But for non-tech people, trying to set it up, for example, at first can be really frustrating.
Would you think, or what would be your thoughts on that manufacturers mostly, if we take something like maybe a middle segment, not a high end luxury, but something like like RAV4 or I don't know, Hyundai Tucson or something like that, that manufacturers are actually kind of dropped a ball on that intuitivity because they are used to that we are using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And yeah, so they don't feel motivated enough to go and do the UX and UI properly. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think so too, at least now. But the funny thing is that our RAV4 is old enough that it doesn't have CarPlay support natively. So if I want that, I actually would need to drive to Toyota service and ask them to do something to maybe update the firmware to some version which has CarPlay support. I just cannot do it myself.
Yeah, so at some point they were not thinking about this enough, and then at some point they already don't think about it because we kind of using our own device. I mean, which is fair enough, but it's not always like that. Especially if you take a car for a drive, so it's you rent a car, then most of the time you don't actually want to plug anything into that car regarding your device, like for sake of the security. And that's where the proper UI would be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, I don't know how I would resolve that as a car manufacturer. I really also understand that today they are trusting that customers will use CarPlay or Android Auto. But on the other hand, there's such functionality in car that's probably not accessible through CarPlay. Like in our RAV4, there's the front and rear cameras, and for that, I can actually adjust the view of what I see from the uh, screen. But even that is not so intuitive. Uh, I don't know for sure what happens when I push some button on the screen or then one physical button. How does the display change? Actually, I have to try it even after I think almost 2 years now with the car.
Uh, that actually brings me to a very interesting saying that once said a former colleague of mine, like very, very smart developer with huge experience. So we were discussing coffee machines and what the coffee machines right now has, a gazillion of options and all that. And he said that as soon as you put a computer inside of anything, it no longer becomes that thing, but it becomes a computer. So the more computerized it is, the more it becomes, a gadget, a thing that needs to be treated as a computer instead of being, let's say, a simple coffee machine, but just give me an espresso, double espresso, something like that. I think that vendor lock is actually that keeps us away from the progress. If what do you think about that? Is vendor lock something that keeps us away from progress, or it actually not keeping us away from progress? Because then vendor, if let's say, like, let's take Apple, and they like to name it ecosystem. I like to name it vendor lock. So if you use everything from Apple, it all kind of works in that synergy. So that could be seen as technological advantage. But then you're locked into the system. Or if we wouldn't have vendor lock, then you would pick any device, and we would achieve a point where any device works in that synergy.
Mm. Yeah, I'm an Apple user, and I like how their devices work together. Yes, but at the same time, you're correct. It's unfortunate that it's so restricted for outside parties to join the party. So it's or even when doing my blog, it would be nice if some of the components within Apple ecosystem would be more open and more easy to get extract the data out. Like in Linux, you can do everywhere, but just trying to get the currently playing song name to Zabbix without shortcuts, it can be hard thing to do if you're using Apple Music.
Would, would you say that open source can solve this issue if we would more be embracing the open source and openness? Would that solve an issue, or that would be more of a risk for companies to lose their competitive edge?
No, open source all the way. If you look those big open source companies that are successful, Zabbix, Grafana, Red Hat, Linux itself, even though it's just a kernel, uh, the future is open source. Closed source systems, they are not going to be successful unless they are some very small niche that's hard to fulfill within open source field.
Yeah, it's also a topic I would like to consume a few minutes more of the time on which the open source and even the closed source often relies on a small plugins, small pieces of code, small software, small drivers that are written by the community. And these folks are not often getting enough credit or even the monetary support.
Of course, if something is really critical, I'm pretty sure that you pick almost any field and there's things like curl that are being used underneath. So there's so many little critical pieces that I would be happy to see that the authors of those would be receiving enough money that they can live rest of their lives without any fear about being unemployed. That would benefit us all. So either they should, big companies should hire these critical guys who are writing those small, invisible pieces of internet that keep it together, or they should donate enough money together, or I don't know how. But yeah,
I would say donate, because if someone hires that person, so then it means that this company has more influence.
that's true.
And if that's the closed source, they can actually lock the thing out, and that couldn't be a good thing. You were busy with monitoring for a while, right? So how that started, why you got assigned to this monitoring task, and what was your journey with the monitoring tools?
Well, as I joined Microbit in early 2000s and I became a Linux admin, of course we had to know what's going on with the servers. Back then we were using Nagios, but when I joined ForcePoint in 2014, actually when my then manager heard that, hey, I have this monitoring background with big environments, he told that, hey, we have this old monitoring tool here. Stonesoft was the company at the time. uh, we would love to have it migrated to Zabbix. They had already Zabbix installed and running, but it was empty. So that was my first task, to get rid of that old monitoring software and get Zabbix up and running. And to my own surprise, because it was my first time with Zabbix, it only took 3 days. And it was improved, compared to old monitoring, because the templates, just throw in Zabbix agent and then you get all the basic metrics. And then I learned about web scenarios and all that. So yeah.
So pretty much, it's fair to say that ForcePoint or Stonso kicked off your Zabbix relationships.
They did. So then, when ForcePoint itself was born in 2016, it was a merger of 5 different companies or so. Then they heard that, hey, I'm this Zabbix guy inside Stonesoft, and they were already using Zabbix within then new ForcePoint as well. They had some Zabbix guys, but they were in the USA. So then sooner rather than later, 4 months after ForcePoint was uh, turned on, I was made our monitoring technical lead. So I then took over Zabbix there pretty much, and yeah, that's where I am.
But then Zabbix became a little bit more than something that you do at work. So you started to write your own blog about monitoring your own house.
Behind every successful man, there's a woman. So So, of course, I had been thinking about that for a long time, because already in 2017, I bought Cosify, which is a home IoT hub where it can combine different devices from different vendors together. So if a movement sensor by Nexa detects movement, then Cosify can tell that, hey, Philips Hue, turn on. So Cosify is excellent in that, but then it lacks in reporting and alerting, or you can create alerts, but compared to how you can create alerts on Zabbix, it's just not there. So then I found out that there's an unofficial API back at that time already for Cosify. So I tried what happens if I install Zabbix at home and then start monitoring how my devices are doing. But then my blog itself started when, well, our freezer was accidentally turned off, maybe during dusting or something. So we had to throw away lots of food after we discovered the freezer status 3 days too late. So then I made Zabbix to monitor that, and then I became Zabbix celebrity when my wife asked that, hey, I would really like to know how often you put on some facial cream, because I get dry skin here, and well, that happened. I started to monitor my facial cream usage, and at that point, that was the point when Zabbix, the company itself, did approach me during private message over a private message on LinkedIn, and the rest is history. When uh, something like that happens, then you immediately get motivated to start writing your blog, and then now it's like part of my daily life to improve my home monitoring or my crazy experiments. Latest being measuring my own wrist temperature. Well, of course, the data is provided by this Apple Watch, but then the data is being transmitted to Zabbix.
It's it's quite fantastic how the ideas of what to monitor comes to your mind, because one the the one I remember was about monitoring your cat's health. And if if you would tell me that you need to monitor the the health of your cat, the thing that would come into my mind is to find a solution that already provides all the data. But you decided to use Zabbix for that. So a tool that's not actually built for this kind of stuff. So all these ideas, where you get them?
It's very random. Sometimes it can be me chatting with my colleagues. One of my colleagues is also kind of monitoring his home. He's based in Canada, so the time zone makes our real time communication a bit limited. But still, other times it can be just me thinking that I really would like to know about this more. Sometimes it's my wife. Sometimes it's some of my blog readers, but yeah, mostly it's my weird imagination.
Of course, of course. So it's you're writing already for a long time, right? So how long it is? Like 3, 4, 5 years?
No. Actually, time flies, but still, my blog only was, I think, March 2022. So not too long. 3 years will be next spring.
How how do you find time to maintain the blog? Because you cannot just start a blog and then randomly publish things. So there's supposed to be, you know, some kind of a steady posting, developing at least, once a week. So where do you find time, and how do you motivate yourself to not to drop a ball and watch some Netflix movie?
Motivation is easy because I really love doing my blog. Time, well, my evenings. So maybe 3, 4 days in a week, I do something about my blog. Sometimes it can be just reading or learning something new, maybe about generative AI. Sometimes I then start trying out if I can actually do something. And well, most of the time, my even though my ideas can be wild, but if you take a closer look, they are kind of repetitive how I do them. I use iOS shortcuts. Once you do one, then you can quickly do more. They can be something that's using maybe Zabbix new Selenium tests. So that's also easy because it's built in Zabbix now. So actually building those things is not too time consuming. uh, One thing that was a bit different, though, was of course when I started playing around with generative AI. So learning about GPT for all and language models and the how to integrate that with Zabbix was a bit of trial and error, of course. But yeah, I I always take my time. I'm not in rush, and some of my blog posts are very ad hoc, like this wrist temperature monitoring after my pneumonia. But but then the others are something I'm slowly building background and then only publishing when I have done something.
And since we start to talk about, the large language models, generative AI, and all that, um, I was attending the Zabbix Summit this year, and there was at least 5, maybe 6, maybe even more talks about AI. What do you think about AI? Not necessarily in scope of Zabbix, but AI in monitoring. Can AI solve issues or make monitoring easier, or it's going to complicate stuff even more, or thanks to the AI hallucinations, will even make things worse? What would be your thoughts on this?
Like I said during my own speech on stage, that I wouldn't let it fix or resolve anything automatically just because of those hallucinations. I really wouldn't want it to run anything without asking from humans first. Uh, uh, what I have found that it can provide you more info and be helpful. Uh, Sometimes it can, for example, if you give it a bunch of log files to analyze, then even though it might hallucinate, but it can very easily also spot something that you might not have seen, because if you have 1 megabyte of log to read, you easily miss a spot there. But AI can also tell you that, hey, looks like that there was error on that line, or this configuration parameter looks odd, or something like that. It can also, with embeddings or maybe full training, it can also learn about your systems. Like with GPT for all, there's not the risk that your data would be spilled to OpenAI or some other big company. It stays within your environment. But if you feed it info from your playbooks and Confluence documents and whatever, then it kind of learns about your systems, and it can actually provide you additional help. I have made an custom UI, much like what I did show during my Zabbix Summit speech, and I can actually at work ask from it about our different products or acronyms or something like that, and it will respond back. Uh, it can also kind of reply back if I ask that were there any incidents in July 2024, and it comes back with some form of reply. So I consider that it's a supportive tool which quickly shows you more info about your environment without you needing to go to different places. But I wouldn't trust it as yeah, like uh, an expert that would actually fix something.
If you don't trust it to actually fix something, basically that means you don't trust it to take a decision. Can we name it AI, the artificial intelligence, or it's more like a chatbot with knowledge?
Uh, Maybe it's a chatbot or a drunk hallucinating piece of software, but yeah, I'm not even thinking today, but seeing how fast it has developed when after OpenAI did launch now famous ChatGPT, I'm fully expecting that even though today it hallucinates and can be quite unpredictable, things will be very different in 5, 10 years, if not sooner. So that's where we have for which we have to prepare and now learn how to use it. Now we can ignore the fact that it can be unpredictable with its responses and that, but we have to see the opportunities what it can actually provide to us.
Do you think it's a threat? It's a threat for humanity? Because there, what my what this is based on is there was a podcast where by Lex Friedman. He was interviewing a guy who actually is from Latvia, but then moved to US, and he was very pessimistic. And his kind of research is revolving around the AI, and he was quite pessimistic about the future of humanity along with AI, so that the AI actually threatening the the humanity rather than helping. And there was an interesting say an interesting phrase is that if you ask a squirrel how human beings can kill you, squirrel will never come up with the actual way how you will kill the squirrel. What do you think if AI threatening us or no?
Ultimately, every new technology can be used in wrong ways. So if you think of it AI alone won't kill us or do anything bad. But of course, if it goes up to militaries and their decision chains, then we are going full Terminator, and then it might threaten us as a humanity. Other than that, mm, it will give us more opportunities. Yes, for sure, some professions will disappear or change their roles because AI will replace humans in some places, that's for sure. But then I'm sure that also some new stuff will come out of it. And one thing, uh, now that it evolves, is that I'm hopeful that, for example, health and research for new medicines, and maybe it can help doctors to diagnose patients much faster. So that's something I'm hoping, that instead of killing us, will make us healthier, and will reduce the time you need to spend at the doctors or hospital, because they can find the root cause for your own health issues much faster.
So we can agree that it's a powerful tool, and it's actually a matter how it's going to be used. Well, we unfortunately, I'd say, from my perspective, we cannot stop the military complex to take that any possible technology and turn it into a weapon, right? So the military complex and lobby of the military is way too big, and they take any possible technology to advance their weapons. So that's, yeah, it's just a matter how and where you use it. So if you would um, quit Force Point tomorrow, what would be your gig? Would you stay and look for a job in this field, in technology, or you'd be looking for a completely different venture?
No, I would stay within technology, likely monitoring. Uh, I would IT monitoring I have seen, but if there would be opportunities to uh, start monitoring something out there, something in physical world, then that would be very interesting and fascinating. I know that it's being used for multiple use cases in the real world. We have seen that in summits, and then Zabbix use cases they present in blog and their webpage. So that would be a great opportunity. Yes.
Would you be interested, for example, in something like OT monitoring, the factories and all that? Is that something that you could be looking at?
Yep, yep, exactly. Or then even something more uh, creative. Let that be your everyday stores, or health, or animals, or whatever.
I hope you're not getting thrown out tomorrow, but well, at least you have a backup plan, or kind of you have a vision of what you'd like to take next. Any hobbies outside of tech?
I have PlayStation 5 collecting dust. Then I have my synthesizer. But we have a toddler, which is the reason why my PS5 is collecting dust. So I spend time with my family when I'm not doing my blog, or not at work. I like spending time outdoors when it's not winter. I'm not a winter person, like said. Uh, we used to travel more before the pandemic and before the toddler, but traveling is, of course, something I like to do. Then some good food, maybe some culture, let that be movies or some nice theater or something.
What do you think about gaming nowadays and games nowadays? Um, are they became better, worse, or uh, is there any stagnation in the gaming? What do you think about that?
One thing about many of the modern games, that pisses me off is that they are so large. They are inflated in their size by introducing uh, unnecessarily big worlds. Then there's those side quests, endless, which just come. They are just there. Also, the main missions can be repetitive, and if they wouldn't artificially inflate the length of the story and the size of the worlds, the games could be more enjoyable actually. Especially when you have your family and you don't have endless time for gaming. If the main story is like 120 hours, who the heck is going to finish that game when at the same time you have so many new titles coming out you are supposed to play.
Right. Is it actually? I also can relate to that. I don't recall which game it was, but I started to play that, and to me, it was so unnecessary complex. And it's not about the difficulty of the game, but the complexity. So it had so many buttons involved, so many options, so many stats you can do that. And I get it's it's fine tuning, it's fun and so on. But to me, it was not enjoyable anymore because I just wanted to play a game, look at the story, enjoy the story. I don't know, kill the dragon, get the princess, and live happily ever after.
Yes, the big studios in gaming world are perfect example of enjoyable game is, for example, Stray. Since you're a cat person, I think it's if you're successful, it's like 4 hours uh, to complete it, and over the game you get to see different uh, places, and the graphics are fantastic, and it's fun to control a cat. So it was a fun experience for me. But then if I start up something like Assassin's Creed, oh my god, it's so full of missions, and then it's so punishing because if you go somewhere before you are leveled up enough, you just cannot win, and then you have to do something to get your level up, which then again consumes your time, and then you are already like, how can I get one more level so I can finally enter that one place I want to go? So it's too complex. We are overcomplicating many areas. I find it good that we have the variety. If there's people who enjoy these kind of complex games, yes, that's fantastic. But many of the games from big studios are kind of clones of each other. The graphics change, the theme of the game changes, but the controls, the game mechanics, everything remains kind of the same. You grind through stuff. You may have to collect some items so you can build new items and blah. It's all the same.
Would you? What do you think about online games?
I lose in them all the time. If I enter something like Battlefield or Call of Duty, I have maybe 2 seconds lifespan. Another thing that changed the gaming is the greediness of game companies. They want to extract every possible cent out of your wallet with micropayments. Or maybe those are going away. I wouldn't know. But there was a point when everything was give us more money and you get past this thing, or you have to buy some deluxe edition of some game or gaming pass or whatever to keep on playing.
Well, if you would meet yourself 20 years ago, somebody invented time machine, and you're the first one who's going to try it out, and it can go like 15 years or 20 in the past, at exactly to the same place, and you meet yourself, a younger version of yourself. Is there anything you would recommend to a younger self, uh, you know or you would not, or you would avoid meeting yourself, and you would do something else?
Hmm. Since I have been quite happy with my life, maybe I would say that keep on doing what you are doing. But the alternative fact would be that avoid IT, go to pilot school, because my another plan would have been to become a pilot and then get to fly to places.
Yeah, so that could be a potential twist. Um, would you recommend yourself to start blogging earlier?
About my home, maybe, maybe not, because it was nice to be a regular guest at the Zabbix Summit for the first few years, just to see what it's about, and then get the confidence that hey, I might be interesting enough to be part of that stage. Uh, yeah, for sure, I might have started the blog sooner, but then again, maybe I had other priorities, like getting to being a known person inside Force Point, to doing other stuff like play those games. Maybe now I don't regret that I did spend so much time with my PlayStation as well, uh, before this blogging thing, because now if I have to pick between doing something for my blog or playing games in the evening, I almost always choose the blog anyway.
It's like a baby, right? So you see it growing.
Yeah, especially because if you think of it, NHL games can only advance so much. Once you have play, played maybe 5, 10 different versions of them, yes, the new ones look better, but in the end, it's only NHL. Uh, if you have played Call of Duty once, well, it's the same tunnel run. You shoot enemies, move on to the next place, shoot enemies, move on to the next place. Watch some cutscenes in the middle. So even though I find still playing games very fascinating and relaxing, but I consider it more beneficial for me to make my blog, because it kind of provides me job security as well. I can at least imagine that should something happen within Force Point, I don't have any issues to prove to someone that hey, I can do monitoring.
Windows versus Mac OS. Which one you pick?
Mac. I have always hated Windows and Microsoft, so Mac any day.
That's why you have PlayStation 5, not the Xbox, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So you're doing some stuff during the evenings, and obviously you have your 9 to 5 in the morning. So morning versus evening.
20 years ago would have been evening. Now I'm a morning person.
Audiobook versus paper or digital book.
Hard one. I'll pick traditional book. I was thinking about for a second, because audiobook would be something I would listen to when I'm walking around. But yeah, other than that, I like to read from screen or paper.
Okay. Since we're talking about reading, what do you pick? A fiction or a non-fiction?
Fiction, because if I just want to read something to relax, then fiction, of course. I read enough technical documentation and everything.
So you're not into autobiographies and all that.
No,
Cool. Okay. Speaking of looks, Red Hat versus Debian.
Debian.
Hmm, that's good. And the last but not least, and also regarding technology, on premises versus cloud, aka someone else's computer.
On-prem.
On-prem all the way.
On-prem all the way. That's what I would love to see, because then I have all the control. Uh, I have predictable expenses. Cloud can be cheap at first, but then when your business grows, things can change, and then you have kind of vendor lock-in.
Okay, um, that would be it. Thank you for joining. It was a pleasure to see you. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and we actually tackled very interesting topics during this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. This surprised me as well. It was because we were speaking so much about something else than technology itself. So it was very.
Right. So if folks are going to look for your blog or anything else, where they can find you.
WhatsApp home.fi.
Thank you so much, and see you again soon.
See you. Bye.